we got a patch. It's coming. It's coming tomorrow. But in this video, we're going to talk about the patch notes that are coming our way. Dmitry Grigorenko is the game director who talked about what some of these balance patches are doing, how their stance is on everything after patch 4.0. So in my typical fashion of running the knowledge of my video, let me just give you a quick breakdown of what's coming in 4.1. Again, you're watching this video on a Wednesday. This is coming out tomorrow on a Thursday, probably anywhere between 3 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, because that's what it came out last couple times. But all the bolters are getting a pretty significant buff at a minimum of 10% for the bolt rifle, all the way up to a 20% for the auto bolt rifle in the entire bolter family that is coming. They are rolling back the coherency of lethal, so no longer will you have to deal with the tight formation of lethal. They explained why they brought it in, and it's a pretty good explanation. We'll talk about that later, but that it will no longer be in lethal. Some of the armor debuffs are being rolled back with ruthless, but they will remain for substantial. I might have that correct. It might also be, it might be the other way around. We'll read it live, but they've rolled back a little bit of that. With the spawn rates, they've said that it was an unintended circumstance of creating lethal and wanting to up the ante in ruthless, but it infected all the way down to minimal. So the spawn rates have been drastically dealt with extremist spawn rates to have a much better presentation of the game. Basically, to put it all in short, patch 4.1 will feel like patch 3.0 did, with a minor reduction to your armor in ruthless. That's kind of the long and short of what I've gotten here, and a buff to our bolter weapons. So if you were having fun in patch 3.0, you didn't want any change to any difficulty, it'll only be a little bit harder in ruthless, which is the second highest difficulty behind lethal. And I'm pretty fine with that. I think that's kind of what people ultimately wanted. I think the biggest problem with 4.0 was that it made minimal, average, and substantial so much harder, that the process of getting good for the higher levels was much harder. That's the down and dirty of this entire patch notes. We're going to go through everything here with a fine-tooth comb, all the things that they've said, and talk about them. But if that's all you wanted to know, I don't want to waste any more of your time. Go ahead and feel free to shut the video down and get back to enjoying the game when the patch comes out tomorrow. We'll be streaming that new patch, talking about all the changes, how it feels, everything. You can go ahead and check that out on my Twitch, linked below and in the pinned comment. And I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, so come on over and check me out. But let's get started here on patch 4.1 for Space Marine 2. So before we get started, we have a letter here from the game director. The game director wrote a lot of letters throughout the whole entire thing to kind of give you a sense of what they were feeling about stuff, mainly to apologize, but also to illustrate that this wasn't meant as a way to crack at people, right? And I think the best thing about this is the realization that truly most of this was a bug from 4.0, which is good to see, because that's the kind of summarization. It's kind of what I thought it was in my last video, is that the AI director felt bugged, and that is indeed the case here. So before we get to the details of the new patch, we want to thank you for being so involved with the game and making your opinions heard. While we noticed the criticism with regards to difficulty adjustments, and rightly so, we'd also like to thank you for very positive feedback on the new termination map. No matter the feedback, we're grateful that you feel so passionate about Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Key takeaway for me personally is that I forgot that once the game comes out, it's no longer a dev's game. It's yours first and foremost. This is why moving forward, we'd like to harness this energy by establishing public test servers. So they would like to they would let you try out major balancing updates and make your voices heard before they are pushed onto public branches, which I'm super down for. We're hoping to make these available around early 2025. So that should be coming hopefully with the season 3 of everything. And we'll see what that looks like. So this update, though, it says will be coming on Thursday, so that will be tomorrow. So we'll see that tomorrow. But as far as gameplay and balancing tweaks for operations mode. So the AI director and enemy spawns. Let's just read. I know this is a lot. I'm going to read it out to you. I'm going to have the link below. You can go ahead and check this out if you don't want to read, if you don't want to sit through all this crap. But here was our reasoning before patch 4.0. When the game came out in September, the ruthless difficulty win rate hovered around 60%. Weeks later, and with the changes introduced by patch 3.0, we saw the same win rate had jumped to over 80%. And we received a lot of feedback stating that the game had become too easy, even at its maximum difficulty at the time. With patch 4.0, our aim was to tweak enemy spawns to increase the overall number of enemies rather than reverting to buffing their health, which I honestly, what is that? I think this is the right way to approach an increase to difficulty. I just think that increase to difficulty wasn't good for the other difficulties. And that's what he says. Unfortunately, this had an impact on the easier difficulty levels as well. For example, the win rate on the easiest difficulty drops slightly after patch 4.0 from 95 to 93%. This may not look like a lot, but numbers aren't everything. Your feedback made it clear that the game had become more intense and stressful on lower difficulties, and this was never our intention. As I personally emphasized in interviews, Space Marine 2 is about the power fantasy. So the result here is extremist enemies spawn rates in minimal, average, and substantial difficulties will revert back to their pre-patch 4.0 levels and will be significantly reduced in ruthless difficulty to hopefully strike a balance between how hard the game was at launch and how easy it became at patch 3.0. Honestly, like, if this is a 60% and we're at it jumped to an 80%, I think having that number at like a 75% is okay. You know, like, hey, that means a quarter of the time you fail. Cool. You're going to get better so that you can really hit lethal, because I think that having ruthless still have a good challenge for you so that you can jump into lethal not feeling like it's such a huge difficulty spike is the right thing to do. If it's, oh man, I'm crushing ruthless, let's just jump into lethal, and lethal just dunks on you, you're going to be like, I don't know why I did this to myself. So I think that there needs to be a good progressional power ramp. It's what I said before in lethal. I want lethal to feel like my head is just below water. And I think the other difficulties should get you ready for that, right? Since lethal isn't tied to any actual progression in the game, whereas ruthless is. Ruthless is how you're going to get access to your first relic tier of armory data. So if it's too hard, then people will get frustrated because they can't get access to the highest tier of weapon. But lethal exists to really give that sweaty challenge when you're outside of that progression. You've maxed your characters, you've maxed your desired weapons. Let me just throw my face against the Tyranid Horde. And there it is in lethal. Well, Tyranid and Chaos, I suppose. So, with minimal, average, and substantial difficulties, reduce spawn rate of extremist enemies to match pre-patch 4.0 levels, and significantly reduce spawn rate of extremist enemies in Ruthless. So we'll see how that feels. Like we were saying before in the video where we took a look at 21 missions, which is not a significant number, right? Everyone's always has pointed that out to me. That's not a huge sample size, but that's around 10 and a half, 11 hours of playtime if we're just talking strictly 30 minutes a game. So it did take a good amount of time to compile that. So looking at those numbers, which again are skewed, we had a huge zone throw spawns, tons of extremists just jammed up your ass. Oh, okay, well, calm down, computer. So we'll see what that looks like. I don't want it to be too low that you can just walk through Ruthless, but I do want to provide an ample challenge so that you can get ready for lethal, as I've said now 50 times. So weapons. They said they've wanted to increase the bolter rifle, and here it is. So the auto bolt rifle will get a 20% buff to its damage, which is needed. It is the worst bolt rifle. It's the worst bolt weapon in the game. I'd rather have a bolt pistol than an auto bolt rifle in operations mode. Different in PvP and in campaign. The bolt rifle, even though it had an increase of 10%, the heavy bolt rifle had a 15%. This thing's going to feel, mark my words right now, this thing's going to feel like a goddamn tank, because the heavy bolt rifle is already really, really great for not having a grenade launcher on it. So I bet you this thing's going to be awesome. The Stalker bolt rifle is really going to shine at 10% increased. Marksman bolt carbine at 10% and Instigator bolt carbine at 10%. The Marksman bolt carbine is the marksman variant of the bolt carbine. So the bolt carbine here has one variant where it has a scope on it, so you can actually shoot like a DMR, dedicated marksman rifle. So the bolt carbine will get a 15%, marksman variants will get a 10%. I don't think that this is a 15% for the bolt carbine as a whole, and then the marksman gets an additional 10. I don't think that's how that works. I think it's 15 for bolt carbine and 10 for the marksman version of the bolt carbine. Instigator bolt carbine is going to get a nice buff at 10%, which is going to feel real good for those of us that don't like to use Melta on our Vanguard. I think that's only me. The bolt sniper rifle, only at 12.5%. The bolt sniper rifle is really good at relic, but it's a pain in the ass to get up to relic and enjoy it. I actually probably would have liked to seen this at like a 15 or 20% that would make it feel impactful, but I could have also liked to have seen this on like an increasing scale. 12.5% on relic, but give me more on the lower tiers so they actually feel impactful. And personally, the bolt sniper rifle feels so weak until you get it to relic. So struggling through. I guess my problem there though is every time I'm leveling up a new weapon, I'm always doing it on Ruthless because I've got these characters maxed out or near maxed out. So I'm like, screw it. So maybe that's a me problem, but either way. Oculus Bolt Carbine, damage increased by 15%. That's still not going to change how terrible its perks are. And then the Heavy Bolter has a damage increase of 5%. Heavy Bolter 2, another one that really suffers until it gets to Relic, and then it is amazing at Relic. So hopefully this gives us a little bit more viability with it, but I think the biggest problem with stuff like the Heavy Bolter, the Oculus Bolt Carbine, the Instigator Bolt Carbine, and maybe the Bolt Sniper Rifle are their perk selections. Yes, damage increase is going to be great, but their perk selections are also really not great, so they can't leverage more damage from their perks, and that really makes it frustrating. But great to see this across the board, minimum of 5%. I said 10% in the intro, but it's 5%, all the way up to 20% for that auto bolt rifle, hopefully bringing it back up, which is weird. Focus Entertainment posted a statistic that says the auto bolt rifle is the most used weapon in the game, but I think that's across all 3 modes. It makes a lot of sense in PvP because it's all about bursting things down. So that, I guess that's where that comes from, but it's wild to me that that's a thing. Into our difficulty. So Ruthless, player's armor is increased by 10%. We are partially rolling back the change from the previous patch on Ruthless difficulty following your feedback. With patch 4.1, we're hoping to find the right compromise between how easy Ruthless difficulty felt after patch 3.0 and how it felt after last week's 4.0. The reason it was reduced last week was that we noticed a very substantial bump in win rates on Ruthless after patch 3.0, as Minoris enemies would no longer remove the entire armor bar with their attacks. Ranged AI damage was nerfed across the board, and the ability to regenerate armor by parrying normal Minoris attacks was added. I feel like there's also a bug that has broken part of that ranged AI, that they still will like point blank range you in the face, right? You'll get hit by a Rurik Marine if you're like a half of a meter away from them. The Devourer, the Tyranid Warrior with a Devourer will just chunk you if you're right up next to it. So I wonder if that maybe broke that portion of the patch. So the armor decrease is it's at halfway point right here, right? So it's not as drastic as it was before, but it still is an armor decrease across the board. Not a substantial one. I don't think at 10% you're really going to notice it that much. I think that, let's take a look at this. So previously on Dragon Ball Z, with this ammo crates have been limited, player's armor reduced by 15%. So this is 5% reduction. I'm sorry, I thought it was 20 before. So it's only a 5% reduction in your armor. So hopefully this kind of hits a middle point. I personally think that this player's armor's reduction of 15% wasn't able to be felt by players because the spawns were so ridiculous. So yeah, I think having 15% more armor maybe would have helped you, but I think that there was such a ridiculous amount of extremists that if you're not used to Ruthless or coming into it for the first time, it didn't really give you breathing room to actually even measure that. So I actually would have been probably fine with a 7.5 to see how it goes, but well, what the hell, at that point too, what the hell's 2.5% more, right? So 10% increase, so 5% is your total reduction on Ruthless armor. For Substantial, though, despite the last patch notes listing a decrease in armor and substantial difficulty, this change was mistakenly left out of our last update, hence why you won't see it being reverted. So Substantial will not be reverted because it was not actually in the last patch. Wherever that is. Oh, I guess not there. I guess they removed it from the patch notes. So yeah, you will actually now have your substantial armor reduced just slightly. Lethal type formation system is removed. So their objective here, though, was to kind of give you a horizontal and vertical progression, i.e. dealing more damage to ever stronger enemies. I don't really know what that means. I don't mind this system. I think it's a cool system if it felt better implemented. Like I've said so many times, it felt bugged because the assault perks weren't working. If you were last man standing, you couldn't get armor back. And the if you're playing with bots, they sometimes don't keep in tight formation and coherency, so you couldn't get armor back. That felt all more bugged than it didn't feel like a bad, than it felt than a bad system. And on top of it, I think there was too tight of formation. If it just had like a little bit more of a range increase, I don't think our Vanguard and Assault Brothers would have felt so outside of the range. I think that is enough to make this a cool formation, but in its current iteration, it did have some issues. The problem, though, or one thing I liked about it was I play with one of my friends, And one of my friends is always ahead of the crew. He's always running forward. He's a bulwark. He's up in the front line. It's like, dude, we are not even, you're a whole half of a room ahead of us. And this put the brakes on him in a way that I really needed, because he was just jumping into it and he would go, I'm dead. I'm like, well, it's because you're way far away. We're on the hardest difficulty. We're trying to keep pace with us. Don't keep pace on your own pace because you're going to die. I think I like that throttling for playing online with random players, because random players sometimes will just kind of run amok. At the same time, though, it's too much of a leash at this point that it prevents Assault and Vanguard from actually doing what they want to do. So it's been completely removed from the game. The intention, though, of adding it, as they've said, this system was also designed as a first step towards the introduction of gameplay modifiers down the line, both negative and positive, something World War Z players will be familiar with, but your feedback showed that the proximity requirements felt too restrictive. So I would love to see on a beta test server, a public test server, the tight formation, its range increased, and different tweakings to the way that the possibility to getting your armor back can be done for perks, for being the last man standing, for playing with bots, stuff like that, to make this system work. And maybe this is a modifier that you can throw onto games, kind of like you used to be able to do with Halo, right? Like, oh, you're going to play with this skull, it's going to add this difficulty. And maybe having those modifiers on, positive or negative, gives different experience and so on and so forth. The problem is experience doesn't give much of a benefit once you've maxed out a weapon or a class, right? So that would all have to come out with prestiges and stuff like that. So as a result, it's been removed. So with AI, a recurrent piece of feedback, we've seen that the AI allies can feel useless. So bots deal 30% more damage to bosses, which will be pretty cool when you're trying to do decapitation on your own. Fighting Zoanthropes is often reported as a source of frustration. So now Zoanthrope shield swap cooldown with another paired Zoanthrope is increased by 10%, meaning you'll take them 10% longer to swap their shields, which is good because, another thing I would wish here is that the shield, if you throw a crack grenade onto a Zoanthrope and then it swaps the shield, the crack grenade doesn't hurt them. Have it hurt them. It's already in the shield. It's not like that shield's in their body. Like it's around them. So the crack grenade's already inside. You've already turned the shields up. You fool. Like the Death Star shields are down. So I think that would be a cool thing to do here is don't have me waste my crack grenade because I don't know when those shields going to swap, right? There's no indicator. It's not like, oh, it's blinking on one of them. Don't throw your crack grenade. Or maybe even add some sort of visual telegraph telling me, oh, it's blinking over this one. It's going to swap soon. Something that tells you that that's coming. Another thing too, that is not addressed in this patch note that I would really like to see is the change to the cues for a parryable attack and a non-parryable attack. It's a visual cue, not a sound cue, because they share the same sound cues. I want it to be different sound cues. That's a personal skill issue. I should notice that if it's a red one, I don't go ahead and parry, I dodge. But there are so many other cues that have that same exact sound that you do have to parry for. So it's such a muscle memory thing at this point to hear that and press that button. Oh, it's an off-screen gaunt, press the button. Oh, it's something's going to do a parryable attack, press the button. Oh, a Ravener's coming up. I'm stupid. I parried. I'm dead. Like, that's a personal skill issue, like I've said, but it's something I think would be a nice quality of life to move away from the similarity between a parry and a dodge outside of just a visual one. What if I was colorblind, Fixed a bug that caused roll distance to be shorter than before. So those rolling issues, they have stopped. This is probably the most impactful and annoying consequence of patch 4.0. While iframes were the same, the distance difference made it much less effective versus range attacks. With this bug fix, you should feel a great improvement in your fights against range enemies. So if you had a problem with the dodge, it has been fixed. Fixed a bug with unlocking lethal difficulty reward decals and crash fixes and general stability improvements. So a lot of the big things that were big issues with people's 4.0 experience have been addressed in this patch. Do you feel like this is going to be enough to push you forward? Do you feel like this is enough to bring you back if 4.0 ostracized you? Do you feel like they really listened to you with this patch notes? Well, let me know what you feel in the comment section below. I feel personally like this is pretty much exactly what people wanted. All the big things that people didn't want from 4.0 were rolled back. And very rarely do you see a full rollback of a patch. The concession to say like, hey, yeah, you know what? It's our game. We wanted it this way. You guys said you want it this way. Well, let's not even just meet in the middle. Let's just meet your expectations plus a little bit of ours. Because I think ultimately the result is the ammo crate thing is still there, which it's something like 8 full recycle or full refills per Marine per ammo crate, something ridiculous. I don't think the ammo scarcity is one you're really, really going to feel. And let me know, now that you're going to be able to play through this and not get drowned in extremist spawns, you're probably going to feel what that ammo scarcity feels like, because you're not going to be just unloading constantly on hordes at substantial and minimal and average. So it'll be nice to see with that. And it's only on Ruthless anyway, right? And your armor change is only 5% reduced on, what's it called? On Ruthless. So I think overall, this is the right move. Bolter damage increased too. So it's nice that, hey, you're going to make things harder for us by having an increase in spawn, but now we have better ways of dealing with things, having better bolter damage. So go ahead and let me know what you think about this patch in the comments below. Is this the right move? Or is there still more you want to see? I know we do still have the Dark Angels cosmetic chapter pack coming, and we still have that Volkite pistol coming, as well as a new enemy. From what I understand, the Hierophant Biotitan is not the new enemy that was promised. It's just simply part of the map of Termination. The new enemy that is supposedly coming is the Zangor Shaman. Shaman? Who says it like that? So the Zangor Shaman, who's coming hopefully alongside that cosmetic pack, or if not, by the end of the year. But again, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.